Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Kathy Baker. I am a speaker and author, a certified life coach, and I lead a women's Bible study group called Women of Worth. I'm going to talk to you today about a topic that I'm titling Developing Healthy Relationships with Adult Children. I have a real vested interest in this topic. Well, first of all, I gave birth to 2 sons. I have 2 daughters-in-law. I have a stepdaughter and a stepson, and I believe we all have healthy relationships, and I'm so thankful for that. But that's not to say that we've had to figure out some things, and I do have respect for all of them, and I know my limits on my input, and I have to step back sometimes when I step in too closely. So I've had to practice some self-restraint and learn to really listen and to most of all be an encourager and give my input really when I'm asked to do that. And at times I have overstepped, and I've learned that I have needed to do this, apologize, and I have done that. And then we get a restart. And so it's been a wonderful relationship, and I want to share with you today some of the things that I have learned and some other tips and strategies and thoughts about developing healthy relationships. Well, first of all, let's establish this. Relationships are hard, aren't they? Oh goodness. Can I get a yes in the comment section? Just yes, just say yes. We'll all know what you mean. So I'm going to go over a lot of issues between parents and adult children in hopes that something will resonate with you. Well, now as we begin, let's keep in mind that God created families, and He wanted them to live in good relationship with each other. But from the beginning, Adam and Eve messed that up, and we have been in family turmoil ever since. It's God's plan for families to get along, and we as parents need to do our part in making that happen, because that's all that we can control. It's hard, but it's not impossible. We can only control what we think and see and feel and do in relation to our adult children. Scripture reminds us of this in Romans 12, verse 18. If it is possible, as far as I am concerned, live at peace with everyone. You see, that says that I'm responsible for doing what I can to live at peace in all my relationships. Well, keep it in mind that what I'm talking about today is a session for parents of adult children. So the information and tips are for you. There are many things that we all realize our adult children need to be doing, but this is not a session for them. My session would sound very different if it were directed to them. So this is not a session on how to fix your adult child. So some may just tune out right now, or you delete, you move on. But it's important to know that this is for parents and what we can do in our relationship. Now, you're going to hear some things that might make you uncomfortable a little bit. But let's realize we're all on this journey. And this is a long process. And it's a journey that has an emotional aspect, a mental aspect, and a spiritual aspect. So I pray that you will take away some ideas to teach you how to better love your children and hopefully like them in the process. Well, one thing I had to get figured out in preparing for this was this term adult children. See, I'm a former English teacher, and I keep thinking adult children is an oxymoronic statement. And so I tried to think of what else there is, and I really couldn't find an alternative. And we could say our offspring or our progeny or grown children or big children, but I loved this one, kidult. That is a gender-neutral term that refers to adults with childish interest. Anyway, you get the idea. It's hard. So a lot of the times I will use a mixture of terms, and I will use the abbreviation for adult children, AC, very often. Well, let's keep this in mind. Adults are no longer children. And that seems to be the source of a lot of confusion and conflict. They are adults. So the techniques that you used to use on them when they were little, and you put them in timeout and you removed privileges and there were consequences and you had discipline techniques, those things don't work anymore. And so we need to begin thinking about them as adults and not children. So that's a paradigm shift today. You are in a relationship with an adult. Now that right there may be the shift that some need to begin thinking differently. So we're going to focus today on being in a relationship with another adult. Whether we agree or disagree with their choices, we want to recognize and affirm by our words and our actions that we still value the relationship. That's hard, and we need to recognize that we're just responsible for how we handle these complicated relationships. And while we may change everything we do, and we may do all the right things and the next right thing, and we speak and act in appropriate ways, they may not. We're not responsible for that, only for our part. Well, I began life coaching about 10 years ago, and the number one topic of my clients is dealing with adult children. And the second is young adults dealing with their parents. Well, I've done quite a bit of research to help me better navigate understanding this. I have a handout on this. If anyone would like this and wants to reach out to me, you may do that. You can get me at a couple of different ways. You can comment in the comment section and I will message you the information, or you can send me an email, and it's my name, kathyrobsbaker@gmail.com. Well, I did a lot of study and work with the book Setting Boundaries with Adult Children by Alison Botke. I've taught that book several times, and I'll draw some things from her. And Dr. Laura Abney is a psychiatrist and relationship specialist in Virginia, and she says this, that 70% of her adult patients, who are, mind you, ages 20s to 50s, say they have problems with their parents. And here's what they say. They feel stretched. They feel stretched between their family of origin, their parents, and their current family. And I think that's where the conflicts lie. They feel stretched. And they are trying to figure out what to do with the family of origin and what to do with their current family. And they're trying to deal with a different set of expectations on both sides. So I did a little research on my own, and I did a survey of the mamas and parents that I have coached or I have taught, and I asked them to give me some feedback on this statement. Understanding that relationships are complex and not perfect, for the most part, these are the traits that I experience with my mother. I use that. And I gave these indicators to see if this was what they were experiencing. I feel accepted, supported, and respected. I enjoy spending time with her. Boundaries are followed. Conversations are good, and her advice is appropriately given and appreciated. Well, the results I got back were pretty encouraging. Healthy relationships were 60%. Moderately healthy were 10%, and unhealthy was 30%. So it's a small sample, but I thought I got a little deeper when I asked for some statements about where they were. Well, this was an encouraging thing. One said, my mom is really one of my best friends. She respects me and how I raise my family, and I enjoy her company. Another one said, in addition to the things in the statement, I also feel cherished, trusted, and appreciated. Those were encouraging statements. And then we had this. My mother gives me advice without my asking for it. I don't trust her with my thoughts and feelings because she's quick to judge. She inserts her own opinions with no regard for how I feel. And here's another one. I wish my mom would simply listen and acknowledge my feelings rather than inserting her opinions and advice. Another one said, I love my parents, but I don't want their advice unless I ask for it. I don't appreciate when they keep telling me what to do and how to think. And then I liked this. See me as an adult. See the good parts of me. Don't forget I'm doing my best. So begin to think now about how you define your relationship with your progeny, offspring, adults, adult children, whatever you want to call them. How do you know it's really unhealthy? Well, here are some indicators. Do they seem, in your presence or even just in your conversations, withdrawn and irritated? Do they try to pick fights? Do they get angry? Are they passive-aggressive or passive or aggressive? Are they aloof, indifferent, making excuses for not being with you, getting defensive, avoiding? Then there's also this aspect. So consider these questions. Are they codependent on you? Are they thriving as independent adults? Are they living independently? Are they working and paying their own way? Have they become unable to emotionally, physically, completely detach from you and live independently? Did you hear in there a spectrum? We had a continuum of unhealthy behavior that goes to being too close to being too distant. And some fall anywhere in between that. Well, we're not going to play the blame game here, so let's move from that and say that there's no shaming and there's no blaming. Whatever has happened in the past has happened, but I always coach forward. And so we see what we can do now, where we are in this relationship. Let's remember, the ACs are adults, and they have their own responsibility in this relationship to live independently and get along. But often they are either unwilling or incapable or not equipped in some way to live a healthy life. And your challenge is how to respond to their unhealthiness with God's love and the boundaries He expects us to create. But parents can have their own issues in the relationships with the kids that they raised and are now adults. So we're looking at two aspects. The first one is either getting too close and feeling the brunt of that, or becoming too distant and feeling the brunt of that. So this is a balancing act. And I've thought of all kinds of metaphors we can use. We can think of the trapeze artist that is swinging from one side of the trapeze to the other, and they swing, and the adult child swings, and they grasp hands, and all seems to be well, and they fly back, and they land on the opposite sides, and things are going great. And then there's also the trapeze artist who begins to swing and falls because there is no net, and falls into disaster because they're ill-equipped to handle the relationship. We can think of the relationship with your adult child as a dance, where sometimes it's beautifully choreographed and you are dancing along to the music and harmony and love. And then there are other times when you're stepping on each other's toes and it's an off-balance dance. So we need to learn this, when to step in, step forward, and when to step back. This may be another paradigm shift. When to step in and when to step back. When to move in close and when to back off and give a little space and a little distance before they tell you to get distance. Well, let's see how it looks when you get a little too close. This category is called too close in expectations and control. Sometimes parents have really close expectations. They assume everything's going to stay the same, and they have those expectations that these kids we raised them with habits and traditions, and that's going to stay the same. It must stay the same, and it must look the same on holidays, and it must look the same on gatherings and birthdays and vacations and on and on. But when we launch kids, things will change, and they should change. And insisting that things stay the same will create conflict. Change is inevitable. They are going to create some of their own traditions and habits because they have formed, if they have married, they have formed new traditions in their own family, and they have a right to do that, and it's important to do that. But some parents state the unrealistic expectations clearly and loudly and overtly. And it sounds like we are having Christmas, celebrating at 8 o'clock on Christmas Day, and we expect you to be here and bring the egg casserole. It's stated very obviously. But too often, parents that try to be too close and too controlling and too tight expectations can control through subtle subscripts. Now, have you ever created a subtle script for your child? Because they're reading the subscripts, and they know they're supposed to be accepting this, and it sounds something like this. They know they're supposed to wear their hair a certain way, they're supposed to dress in a certain manner, their home is supposed to look in a certain way. They know they're supposed to be available on holidays and also special occasions in the family, and members of our family do this and members of our family do that. And we send a message by what we are covertly saying. The little lines we drop. And then the criticism that we might have of your adult child's spouse or your adult child's friend group, the person that they're dating. And you drop the little one-liners, and they are sending that message. And it's either overt or covert. And that message gets received, and we never really know how it is processed, but it is not healthy. They are subscripts that you would never tell another adult. But the message that is sent with subscripts or actual scripts is that you owe me. You owe me. Well, have you ever been guilty of that? Well, I've done some of that as well, and I had to get a hold of my expectations and set them aside. I had to learn to step back. In my home, I run I guess, I don't know, you call it a tight ship. Things are very organized and they're very tidy. I cook big meals. I do a certain way that I like to set the table and have manners. And so I'm sending messages. And I have to be careful not to send messages to my children that make them feel they're not able to measure up, and then I would be put to the side, and I don't want to send that message. So I've fallen off the trapeze a time or two, and I've had to get up and get back on that balance beam and walk carefully and apologize. And I've learned I cannot expect them to reproduce me and my ways. And that does become freeing, and it becomes liberating, because I'm freeing them to live the life that now they've chosen to live. Well, there are also other kinds of unmet desires and expectations. Dr. Shefali is a clinical psychologist and an author, and she says the most toxic part of the parent and adult-child relationship is using them to meet your own unmet desires. And she gives this beautiful image where she says that we have invisible puppeteering strings tethered to our children, and we keep using them because we've not empowered ourselves to live our own authentic life and to become emotionally healthy ourselves. So, do you think that maybe you have some invisible puppeteering strings trying to control your ACs so that they can in some way meet your unmet desires? And here's one thing she adds to that. She says you can try all the strategies and all the tips and all the things you've been told to do, and if you do not at the same time deal with your own emotional issues, including controlling your desire to control others and living with unmet expectations, you will not see the results that you want. So it takes both of these. It takes meeting our own emotional needs and not sending the wrong messages and doing what we can to have a healthy relationship with the good strategies. So often the tension between parents and ACs are reflections of the parent's own emotional issues. And here's what some of them could be: a fear of letting go, living in constant anxiety, worry, constant criticism. I can't believe they're doing this and living like that, and why did they choose that, and look at how they dress, and look at how they live, and just constant chatter in the mind and sometimes verbally to other people. And so what is happening is that gets reflected on the AC. And it sounds as if the parent wants to dictate the behavior of the child. So that constant chatter, that criticism, that worry, the fear, the thoughts about the ACs, it has to get controlled. It has to switch, because they're living their own life, and there's going to be very little you can do to change that part. Our relationship with our adult child is a mirror of how we relate to ourselves. Well, perhaps the greatest work to be done then in an adult-child relationship is the journey that we go on within ourselves. Well, that deals with trying to get too close and having unmet expectations and unmet desires, too controlling. But here's another area of getting too close. Some parents are guilty of spilling their guts about all their problems. And they emotionally vomit on their children, complaining about other people, complaining about their own spouse, complaining about the neighbors, about life in general. And here, adult children want to see their parents as in charge and capable and in control. And they don't want to be your therapist. They don't want to hear you make all the problems with everybody about you. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear your complaints about them as a problem for the parent himself or herself. They don't want to see you as needy, and they don't want to see you as dependent on them. Well, it's also good to bring them into your world of concerns. There is nothing wrong with that. They need to be aware of some of your medical conditions, some of your concerns in life. But there is a line that we don't want to cross. And so if they're hearing things like these, then this is what's inappropriate. I don't know how I'm going to cope with. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I can't handle it anymore. Your father is driving me crazy. And if you choose to do that, I will. And then you fill in the blank. See, those are emotional issues that parent needs to deal with. Parents who want to get too close should know that you can't expect your AC to put their own family before yours. Because here's a harsh reality. You don't have a contractual relationship with your children. Oh, I know. You spent 27 hours in labor. You sacrificed to get them the best education. You took them to ball practice and dance practice. You listened to the piano recitals. You took them to college. You gave them an advanced degree. You did all of those things. And some with the idea that they'll give it all back to you as an adult. And it just doesn't work that way. We raise our children to fly and to thrive, to grow up and become independent with their own ideas, their own opinions, and their own beliefs that may no longer mimic yours. They get to do that, just as you did when you left your own family of origin. Now, they don't have that contractual relationship with you. There is no contract, but there is one with their spouse. They get to have a contract, a legally binding contract with their spouse. And let no man put that asunder. Whoa! Doesn't that give new meaning? Well, another way parents get too close is by enabling. Let's look at the difference between enabling and helping. Helping is doing something for someone else that they can't do for themselves. Enabling is doing something for someone else when they should be doing it for themselves. Enabling now creates this atmosphere where adult children can become comfortable continuing unacceptable behavior. This is typically in two areas, financial and emotional. Here's some interesting data for us. Roughly 60% of parents of adult children ages 18 to 34 helped their kids financially in 2023. Now that's according to some new Pew research. Most of this was for help with household expenses, cell phone coverage, and some other things of that nature. But approximately 36% of those surveyed said that covering their adult children's expenses hurt them financially. Another study done by Savings.com they did this online survey of 1,000 parents of adult children. 47% of those parents provided financial support to at least one adult child. Of the children who live with their parents, 61% did not even contribute at all to any household expenses, no rent, nothing. And so the headline, though, of this report said something I thought was very interesting. These parents contribute 2 times more to their adult children's monthly needs than to their own retirement accounts. Wow, that was a staggering figure for me. But here, at the same time, in this economy, children need a hand up sometimes. They need to have some support. It's just really hard in this particular climate. So we need to analyze. Are we giving them a hand up occasionally, or are we continually giving handouts? There's the dividing line. Well, emotionally enabling or in helping, helping is another area. Some ACs make a habit of getting their emotional support solely from their parents. They run to mom and dad for every upset. They consistently need their parents to bail them out. They become needy. They think you should drop all the things that you are doing so that they can have their personal needs met. This is not healthy. Everyone needs to find ways to manage their own emotions. Parents need to learn ways to help their ACs with their emotional needs and other needy expectations by guiding them through it so they can manage it on their own. But enablers refuse to do that. And when you refuse to let go, you prevent these adults from learning the skills they need to be successful in life. A message gets sent to them that they're unable to cope. They're unable to manage life on their own. They just can't quite do it. And so that's hurting them, and it's not helping them. Well, I can hear the resistance. It's coming through the screen. It's so hard to do that. We have a different situation in our home. We have a special situation. You know, it's time to examine the extent and the degree of enabling and start asking, is this helping or is this hurting? It's time to cut that cord. Have any of you cut the cable cord? Oh, I did that. It was really hard to do. I had to labor over that, study it, I researched, and then I did it. And I love it. It was such a freeing thing for me. Cutting the cord of enablement is even harder. It's a slow process. Enabling through too much financial support or through too much emotional dependency is unhealthy. So how do we do that? Well, it means a conversation. Most of this is about communication. And this is one of those opportunities where you begin a conversation. And if it's financial dependence you're dealing with, set a timetable for withdrawing some of these funds. And explain it's because you love them. And send that message. They're capable of living and thriving as an independent adult. And yes, they may have to sacrifice. And is there anything terribly wrong with a little sacrifice? And then ending emotional dependency means you stop doing one of two things. First of all, counting on your child as your own adult therapist, Or it means setting healthy boundaries with your AC when they want to come to you for every emotional issue, expecting you to drop your plans and your engagements for them so that you can meet their emotional needs. Well, this is all about boundaries. Parenting is a process. As children leave the nest, you transition out of a parenting role. You set them free to live as adults with choices and decisions of their own. It means setting healthy boundaries with them so that they will know you not going to continue to be their sole financial supporter or emotional supporter. They want to know that there will be limits on the things that you will provide for them. It's hard to do, and Dr. John Townsend, I love listening to him and following his guidance, and he says that setting adult boundaries is hard because of one thing: fear. Fear of losing the relationship with them, fear of conflict, and fear of the guilt you might be dealing with. Fear is an unhealthy emotional reaction, and the fear needs to be dealt with. Fear and faith are not compatible, and dealing with our own fears about setting boundaries is an issue we need to deal with, and that might mean you need some coaching. Some would need some therapy, but boundaries are necessary. Now, I want to be clear about what boundaries are. Your boundary is about your own behavior and what you will or will not allow into your life. It does not dictate somebody else's behavior. You are responsible for creating your own way of living, your own condition in your life, in your home, in your presence. Boundaries indicate what you will and will not tolerate. Boundaries, in a way, are about your own dignity, your own sense of honor, your values, your morals. You don't dictate to others what their boundaries need to be. Often, that's a trap that parents fall into with their adult children, by saying, you just need to do this, and you need to tell him that, and you need to set this boundary. And instead of setting our own boundaries. For example, it may sound something like this: you know, in our home we have this respect for each other, and I'm just not going to tolerate disrespect. And then you have to decide what you're going to do if the respect is not shown or not given. Sometimes it's just a little reminder. That was a disrespectful thing that you said to me, and I want to honor and respect you as an adult, and I want you to do the same. So let's agree that we will have a level of mutual respect in our home. And if this is repeatedly violated, then you have to figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to ask them to leave? That's a tough one. It depends on the degree of the disrespect, I guess. Are you going to remove yourself from them, ask for a little time away? So boundaries have these three parts to them. We need to define what they are. We need to state them, and then we need to follow them. And then I think about really dire circumstances and behaviors with your adult children. That there needs to be a clear, hard, red line boundary. Perhaps your adult child is in a relationship with a toxic person, really toxic, doing things that are immoral, illegal, ungodly, in that category. And you see your child is shrinking, and you're barely able to recognize who they are. This is a dire circumstance, a red flag situation. This is not a situation where that you just don't particularly like the person they brought into their life. You don't like the way they dress, or you don't like their background, or what they've chosen for the career. But this is completely different from that. So hear me carefully. Setting a clear boundary with a toxic person who is really going to lead your child down a very scary, dangerous path. If you need to do some kind of harsh talk where you convince them to leave, at this case, that would be appropriate in this case. But if not, and they continue in this relationship, you might have to say something like this: I am not going to be around that person, but I want you to hear this. I'm always going to be here for you. I want to be around you. I don't want to do this, but I'm doing this hopefully. So it will lead you to ask yourself the right questions so that you will do the next right thing. So that's a boundary for a toxic person. Because I see this, sometimes adults, parents of adult children just start embracing the toxic person. And when you're doing that, you're propping up a relationship that is actually dangerous and unfortunate. I heard of a family recently who was doing this. They were sort of encouraging a toxic dynamic because they didn't set boundaries. This is a very wealthy Christian couple, and they are living in their golden years. They didn't set boundaries with their children, and they have a large home with 5 bedrooms, and now it has 4 generations of the family members living there. The adult children are, for the most part, not married to the person living with them. They brought in their children, and in one situation, they brought in that child's child. So there are 4 generations. Some have been involved in all kinds of unseemly behavior, including drugs, and they're all living in this $1 million home that day by day is becoming devalued in more ways than just financially, because they didn't set the boundaries. They didn't say that this is the condition I want to live my life, and I love you, but I'm not going to allow that into my home. And so that's something to ponder in a very, very careful way, so that you know when it's time to set a boundary such as that, and when it is for a toxic red flag relationship and not one based on your preferences, because that's going to backfire in a big way. You're responsible for creating a condition for how you live. Well, I have lots of tips on instituting boundaries. I have them in the handout I would love to send to you. If any of you are in need of coaching, I can send you information on my coaching practice, and I can go over these strategies with you also. Well, the opposite of trying to get too close is becoming too distant. Well, that's a problem in adult parent-child relationships. Well, this can happen for a couple of reasons. First of all, it can happen when the adult children don't want you around. They don't want you to come over. They don't want to talk to you. They don't really want to be in a relationship with you. They have put you in timeout, so to speak, for whatever reason that you do want to find out about that. And then the other is sometimes parents of adult children just move, they step back. There's been an incident, an event, something's happened in the relationship, and then they just move away, and they don't have to know how to step back in. They have stepped back too far, and they don't know how to step back in. So when you've been put in timeout, what do? Let's know what it looks like. First of all, you're either in bounds or out of bounds in your relationship. If you're inbound in your relationship with your child, it's a healthy relationship, it's comfortable conversations, a good bantering back and forth. You get together, you see each other, you plan, you connect in a really smooth and easy way. Not perfect, but it's very pleasant, pleasing. And then the out of bounds. And that's when there are bad relational habits. There's criticism, there's ridicule, there's anger, there's passive aggressive behavior, there's judgmentalism. And the AC will put up a stop sign. And they say, no, I'm not going to do this. I am going to back out. I'm going to back away. So some parents are in out-of-bounds relationships with ACs because the adult lives an unhealthy, perhaps even toxic life, and they don't want you to be a part of it. That's one way to be put in timeout. The other way is by your own choices of words and actions that have the adult child then say, I'm not having that in my life. You get put in parent timeout when you exhibit out of bounds behavior or when the AC exhibits bad behavior. Here's what I've learned and observed about ACs and keeping parents at a distance. Adult children will want to keep you distance when they sense you want to control them, when they sense that you are going to criticize them. If you step into their decision making, they're going to hear criticism. If you criticize their choices, you're going to be put in time out. Do you tell them what to do? Do you tell them what you expect? Do you criticize other people around them? Because they are going to assume that you will criticize them also, and you will be put in time out. You will be in out of bounds. You will be distant from them. Well, we're going to look at ways to work on these situations, but first of all, let's get perspective. Let's get parenting perspective. First of all, how were you parented? Get some parenting perspective by reflecting. Think about your own years as a young adult. Did you have parents who were too close? And how did that look in your world? Were they too distant? How did that look and feel? Or did they strike the right balance? And whichever way it was, how did that inform your parenting? I encourage you to journal about that. Talk about that. Talk to your spouse about that. Consider the effect of how you were parented has had on your own parenting and what needs to change and what needs to stay the same. And then ask yourself this question: how did I actually parent these adult children when they were younger? Was it a healthy thing? You know, I always say that when I was parenting my sons, I had Dr. Spock and I had Dr. Dobson. Can anybody relate to that? Say, I can relate. I had those two also. Say Spock and Dobson if that was your experience. There were no parenting classes, support groups, no life coaches. There was no Google to look it up. And who went to a therapist back in the day? So we get a pass for our mistakes. We did the best we could with what we knew. So again, we're not going to live in guilt and shame over that. But I do want to point out what longitudinal studies show about effective parenting that resulted in thriving adult children. It happened when these two things were present. Warmth in a relationship. Was there warmth when your kids were growing up? Did you express love to them in clear ways? Did you say, I love you? Did you listen to them? Did you get on their level and connect in that warm, loving way? That's number one. And number two, when warmth in the relationship was balanced with appropriate strictness. So was there structure? Were there rules? And were there appropriate consequences? If you do not have that kind of balance between warmth and appropriate strictness, all is not lost. Don't beat yourself up over it. Stop playing the blame game and focus now on what you can do. So I'm giving you a list of R's, the R's of healthy relationships. I have a whole lot of these, and I hope you'll appreciate how hard I worked to get all the R's together. I thought it would just be a unique way to present the information. First of all, let's repair. Focus on repairing your bond. Family relationships can bring us the greatest joy, the deepest heartache. And so if there is some heartache, invest on repairing those. And what this often means is you initiate, no matter what's happened, own whatever is your part of the issue and issue a heartfelt, humble apology for whatever you own in the breakdown of the relationship. Now, that might be a paradigm shift for some people. Apologize sincerely for any hurt you've caused and make a promise to do things differently from now on, and then do it. It may sound something like this: I've made some mistakes in my parenting and I want to apologize for any pain I've caused you. I'm sorry I didn't always handle situations well, and I'm sorry if I made you feel incapable of making good choices. Please forgive me. I'm going to do better. Go from there. Start there. Mean it, do it. Next, respect boundaries. Do I need to say more? Respect them. Have a mutual understanding that we're going to respect each other's boundaries. Here are some typical areas where we need boundaries. Unexpected and frequent visits. Unsolicited input about a spouse or about anything. Unsolicited advice about how to raise children. Buying things for their home without asking. Comments about their diet or their body. Interfering with their personal life. Set those boundaries. Next, reevaluate your role. Trying to hold on to those old patterns is going to spell trouble. So become aware of your own expectations. This takes some deep thought, because sometimes I find that parents say, "Oh no, we don't do that." But then we start probing and asking questions, and we find all kinds of expectations that have either been covert or overt. And sometimes it's in a tone, it's in your word choice, it's in a role that you assume when you communicate. So remember, you're in a relationship with an adult, one that you did parent when they were young. Are you coming across now as a fellow adult or a scolding parent? I often hear scolding parent tones. Learn to transition from a parental authority figure to a loving mentor. Is that a paradigm shift for anybody? You can put that in the comments. Shift. Next, request and respond. Make requests rather than demands, and respond rather than react. So let's go to the next R, and that is reactions. It's tempting to have those emotional reactions in tense situations. But emotional reactions escalate the conflict. We're supposed to de-escalate. We're supposed to rise above. And so often we need to step away physically and emotionally to reclaim our composure and then continue in a conversation. I love what Lamentations 3 verses 28 through 29 says. When life is heavy and hard to take, go off by yourself. Enter the silence. Bow in prayer. Don't ask questions. Wait for hope to appear. Don't run from trouble. Take it full face. The worst is never the worst. You want to comment on that? The worst is never the worst. So do this. When you're in one of those tense situations, when you don't know what to say, when you're about to flip your lid, press pause, pray, plan your words, and then proceed. Next R, request a time to talk. Find dedicated time to have a conversation about this. It's not going away until it's addressed. You're going to put Band-Aids on it. You're going to let time pass and deal with one little issue, and then you let a week or two pass and another one comes up and you put a little Band-Aid on it. But until you have a real conversation about what the core issues are and the unhealthy relationship patterns, it will not change. You can say something like this, you know, I want to talk to you about ways to make our relationship better. If I ever do anything that alienates you, would you please let me know? You can say that. You can say, have I ever crossed boundaries with you? Is there a better way for us to be in relationship with each other? Or you can say, I feel something is off. And you can say, will you tell me what you need from me? See, all those questions you could possibly say. And then listen, really listen. I have found that the best conversations I have with my sons, and they are frequent, is when I just really listen. Sometimes I just listen quietly and affirm. And I take time to thank them for information they've shared, or to praise them and comment on how much time they spent researching something they've shared, or compliment them on how smart they are in something. And that's so affirming to them, and I think that's why they keep calling. I have one son that I keep his kids and pick them up a lot, and they live in town, so we are together quite a bit, so we're making arrangements quite a bit. So I could talk to him more than once a day. And my other son lives out of town, and I talk with him multiple times a week. And sometimes they're really long conversations that we just have such a good time conversing with each other, and knowing that balance of listening and engaging and supporting and encouraging and sharing our own advice is really important. R, respect their decision. Abide by their decisions, period. Next R, refuse to be disrespectful. And so, in case we don't understand what that means, when we get bossy, we have a little hostility, we get condescending, we get critical, that's disrespectful. And if you do, you're going to be moved to that distance platform, you know, on the trapeze. And when your AC disrespects you, it's time for you to disengage, to step out a little bit and say, please don't talk to me that way. And then step back in with a word of encouragement and say, I love you, but let's just not be disrespectful like that. You can say that. Next are rescue not. Avoid the temptation to rescue and save the day for your child with everything that happens to them. Let them know that you have confidence in their ability to do it. Parents who enable have a hard time doing it. It takes tough love. Allow them to deal with the consequences of their own decisions. Allow them to deal with the consequences of their own decisions. Received messages. Many ACs express that they receive messages that they're just not enough. That unless they agree with what their parents say and meet their parents' expectations and needs and requests, they're not going to get the encouragement, support, and the love that they desire. Adult children can feel that often there's a personal agenda for their love. And what they will do, they will move to the distance if they feel that you don't relate to their choices, and if you are sitting in judgment. They know. Oh, they know. R, reflect. It's important to do constant reflection. When things in your relationship go wrong, take time to reflect your own role. I've had to do this so many times. I do it all the time in multiple relationships. I have to figure out what is my role in this relationship, in this conversation at this time. So when you finish a tense conversation and your AC has acted like a adult, examine how you handled your part of the conversation. Ask yourself what role you played. And if you can't figure any of this out, and if you're in denial and there are issues, I encourage you to see a counselor, to see a coach. Talk to a very wise, impartial friend who will speak truth. Ask them to speak truth to you about it, because you have a blind spot. I see it all the time. There's a blind spot. That's why people need coaches and counselors, therapists, or a really wise friend. Reach out. When you feel distant and you're in timeout, find ways to reach out and show them that you still care and that you love them. And this is totally unconditional. You might send them a sweet card, a funny card, a text. Send them some pictures of some time when you were having a great time and you're wishing them well. Send them a little gift card for their favorite restaurant, or a gas card or something like that, just to say, just because. I did a just because with my son not too long ago. I have it for both of them. And it was just something that was very meaningful. And he said, why? I said, just because. And it was just a sweet, fun moment. It wasn't enabling, it's not indulging, it was just a sweet little thing that I did. It goes so far. And so you present then these, whatever you're going to do. Also ask for an opportunity to speak with them or visit with them if you've been put in timeout, and then you have to wait. You have to wait patiently because it's their decision. And the last one, and fervently, often, really pray. I call it circling Jericho in prayers. Joshua followed God's orders to break down the walls of Jericho. The Israelites were to circle Jericho every morning for 7 days in silence. And then on the seventh day, they were to circle Jericho 7 times in silence. And at the end of the 7th time, they were supposed to sound the trumpet, and they were supposed to blow the horn, and when all of that happened, then the walls were to fall. That's what God had told Joshua to do, and he followed the plan. Now here's what I happen to believe. I happen to believe while they were circling Jericho, those walls of Jericho, double wide walls, and hearing on the inside all the taunts and the yelling and the teasing, the fear-mongering inside, they were to be silent. And here's what I theorize they were doing, is they were praying. What else do? You pray. They were praying around their problem. And that's what I'm advocating for you to do. Circle Jericho with your adult children. Jericho was a city that had a wall of bricks around it. Let's name those bricks in your wall of Jericho. Put your child's name, put any issue that's related to your child, and make sure you put your name on a brick in the wall. And then you circle, fervently praying each day for God to intervene, for God to show you a way forward, for you to live in the fruit of the Spirit in your relationship, for you to do as we read in Romans, as far as you're concerned, do everything possible to live in peace with your adult child. And focus on that. Constantly praying, lifting up your children. And do you know what will happen? Changes will come, because it is God's will for you to live in peace, in a healthy relationship with your adult child. Things will change because it is God's will for you to be in a good relationship. Be faithful in prayer. Be faithful to deal with your own emotional needs, and then follow these tips and these strategies. And here's what will happen. You will have breakthroughs with your adult children. What do you do now? Mentally, you decide what is the hard work you need to do in order to have a better relationship. Write those down. Do the hard work to deal with them. Number 2, emotionally, bring yourself to see your role in the relationship. Know that your relationships mirror your relationship you have with yourself. Understand that. Write down your emotional issues. Find how you're going to get help for that and do it. And then finally, spiritually, reflect and pray. Ask God for discernment and wisdom and what your role is in the situation. Pray for God to intervene, and He will. His will be done. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please comment, please like, please subscribe to my channel. I have other tips and strategies and lessons that are straight from the Bible, and I hope that you will be blessed through those. Father God, I thank you for this time together. Thank you for these words of how we could better live in relationship with our adult children. Help us to follow those, to pray for our adult children fervently, and then to watch what you're going to do in your will. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much.